Good afternoon. My name is Terry Cannon. I am the Executive Director of the Baseball Reliquary. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and membership of the Reliquary, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 20th Annual Induction Ceremony for the Shrine of the Eternals. The bell ringing, which has commenced these festivities since 1999, is in tribute to the Queen of the Bleachers, and perhaps the most famous fan in baseball history, the late Hilda Chester. For 30 years, Hilda held court in the bleachers at Brooklyn's Ebbets Field, clanging her brass cowbells and holding a sign which pronounced, "Hilda is here." Leo DeRocher called her that crazy dame with the cowbell, and Joe Garagiola described her full-throated voice as sounding like the 10-second buzzer at Madison Square Garden. Brooklyn Dodgers pitcher Ralph Branca said Hilda was better known than most of us, and if you stunk, she'd let you know it. Of course, the Dodgers eventually abandoned Brooklyn, and with their departure, Hilda's fame began to fade. While she may have died in relative obscurity in 1978, in our community of fans, Hilda is royalty, and through our annual remembrance, we can be assured that the final bell has not yet rung for Hilda Chester. During the first 19 years that we have had the shrine ceremonies, the National Anthem has been performed on an amazing array of instruments, from trombones and pedal steel guitars to sitars and musical glasses. We even had a version performed on a Chinese violin called an erhu, an ancient instrument that dates back 4,000 years, or about 3,761 years before the birth of Francis Scott Key. We are delighted and honored that Nancy Faust is with us today, and before we welcome her officially as an inductee to the Shrine of the Eternals, we have asked Nancy to make a little shrine history by being the first musician to perform the national anthem on the instrument most associated with the national pastime. At this time, we ask the audience to please rise.
By the
Nancy, you're setting the bar awful high for us now. Before the keynote address and the induction of our Shrine of the Eternals class of 2018, it is my pleasure to introduce the recipients of 2 awards presented annually by the Baseball Reliquary. Leading off, we have the Hildo Award, established in 2001 in memory of Hilda Chester and created to recognize distinguished service to the game by a baseball fan. As you know, we often refer to the Hilda as the Reliquarian's equivalent of the Oscar or the Emmy. It acknowledges our royalty, it symbolizes the best aspects of fandom, and it celebrates the myriad ways in which we exhibit our love affair with the national pastime. The 2018 Hilda recipient, Bart Wilhelm, is a native of northern Michigan, where he has lived in Traverse City since the age of 5. A lifelong fan of the Chicago Cubs and Detroit Tigers, he grew up collecting baseball cards and watching the few games he could get on television in the 1980s. Bart attended his first major league game at Tiger Stadium on August 5th, 1984, the year the Tigers started 35-5 en route to the World Championship. In 2003, Bart started going to a game every Tuesday, which meant a 4-hour drive from Traverse City to Detroit and a 6-hour drive to Chicago. This gradually turned into 2 games a week, and now he goes to live games on all his off days from work, often 2 or even 3 games in one day. He also attends about 20 games a year played by the Traverse City Beach Bums of the Independent Frontier League. Since that visit to historic Tiger Stadium in 1984, Bart has attended over 1,100 games in 272 different professional ballparks. By the end of this summer, he plans to have made it to all the professional ballparks. He extends his season every year by going to spring training and the Arizona Fall League, and he has made it to the last 3 World Baseball Classics. As of this moment, on July 22nd, 2018 at 2:15 p.m., Bart has seen baseball action in 48 different states, including the Midnight Sun game in Alaska. All in all, he attends about 110 to 125 games a year. Bart's fellow Hilda recipient, Tom Derry, who received the award in 2016, said, and I quote, "I don't know anyone who's obsessed with baseball more than Bart. Besides traveling all over the nation to attend ball games, Bart was a dedicated member of the Navin Field grounds crew, the all-volunteer group which preserved and maintained the historic Tiger Stadium baseball diamond in Detroit between 2010 and 2016. Bart would drive 4 hours each way from Traverse City to Detroit to work on the field. And I'm sure you will not be surprised to find out that as soon as Bart's flight arrived yesterday at LAX, he made his way out to Lake Elsinore for a game between the Storm and the San Jose Giants. As we unveil the 2018 Hilda Award, please give a warm welcome to its recipient, Bart Wilhelm.
First of all, I thought about asking Nancy to play a little walk-up music when I came up here originally, because that would be the coolest thing that ever happened. For me, this has been just an amazing journey. I've been going to literally hundreds of games every year for the last 5 or 6 years now. Terry said I'm at 272 ballparks. I have 3 left to go. They're all in the Appalachian League. So sometime in August, I'm going to wind up driving probably 12, 13 hours down to Tennessee and North Carolina and seeing a couple of rookie league ball games. I absolutely still stunned about this, winning this award. When I saw that my name was the one that was selected, I couldn't believe that, of all people, me. But the greatest thing about this has been that my son is in military station just south of here in Camp Pendleton, and I wasn't going to have a chance to see him for another year, but since I came out here, got a chance to pick him up and take him to the game last night, where for the first time in my life, I got to see a triple play. Been over 1,200 games and I had never seen one, and sure enough, the line shot to the shortstop had made an error to put a guy on both first and second base. And the next pitch was a line shot to him. He dove and caught it, and both runners were advancing to the next base. And so he stepped on one base and threw to the other. And I was yelling, triple play, and I looked over and my son was going to get another beer. I said, is that what I think it was? I said, yeah, you missed that. I'm glad it was him and not me. I will say it feels really weird having a day off from work and not being at a baseball game today. So I'm going to make up for it by going to 2 tomorrow. Visalia's got a game at 11 a.m. and Stockton at 7. And so that's basically what I do. I look at the schedule and say, okay, where can I go? Where can I get 2 games in? Where's a doubleheader? Maybe I can get 3 games in. And it's a lot of fun. It's grueling at times. It's quite insane at times, most of the time, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's nothing, for me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of going to a live baseball game, catching a foul ball once in a while, seeing something you've never seen before, even though you've been everywhere watching the same sport. So hopefully I get to continue doing this for many years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bart. I was going to mention, too, to our speakers and inductees today, if they can come up through this way, because we got a cord there. We don't want anybody to trip on. As this is the 20th anniversary of the Shrine of the Eternals, I thought it might be appropriate to incorporate a few stories and anecdotes from past ceremonies into this afternoon's program. And I thought I'd begin by mentioning Jim Bouton's humorous remarks upon being inducted into the Shrine in 2001. After acknowledging family members and former players and coaches who influenced his career, including Seattle Pilots manager Joe Schultz, who Jim described as the greatest character an author ever had to work with, he concluded his acceptance speech by offering a mordantly hilarious forecast for baseball in the 21st century, mixed with generous helpings of satire and irony. Bouton foresaw the day when entertainment conglomerates would own teams and networks, buying each other up and leading to one company owning all the teams. The players' share of revenues would drop from 51% to 1%. It would be like the old days, Bouton mused. Reporters could be happy again, since they know the players are worse off than they are. The major difficulty will be selling baseball to the American public, since there will be no homegrown players, thanks in large part to the disappearance of sandlot baseball. Bouton contends that the search for an American-born ball player will inevitably lead to prisons. With more kids living below the poverty line and young kids being tried as adults, prisons will be overflowing with young talent. Prison sports will become widely popular, especially to television viewers of the highly rated PSN, Prison Sports Network. Prison League Baseball, PLB, will be particularly exciting. As commentators might put it, these guys want to play ball so bad, They'll run through a wall for you. Baseball terms like stealing, hit and run, and leaving the yard will take on a new meaning. The Prison Sports Network, one of the few remaining independents, will even have their own webpage, www.con.com. The death penalty will be eliminated for gifted athletes. Prisons will become our new sandlots, the playing fields of our future heroes. With taxpayer dollars going to new stadiums at the expense of our public schools, responsible parents will try to get their kids into a good prison. And on that optimistic note, Boughton concluded his remarks. The Baseball Reliquary owns a great debt of gratitude to Jim Boughton, not only for including a chapter about the reliquary in the most recent edition of Ball 4, entitled Ball 4, The Final Pitch, but Jim also described the reliquary as the People's Hall of Fame, a phrase which has become identified with this organization. I'm sure that many of you have heard that Jim, who is now 77, was recently diagnosed with a brain disease associated with dementia and has lost some of his language skills. We were delighted to hear from Paula Kerman, Jim's beloved wife of 36 years, that the Bulldog had a wonderful time at the recent Yankees Old Timers Day game, but it was surely bittersweet with the realization that it was likely the last time he will don the Yankee pinstripes. So on this, the 20th anniversary of the Shrine of the Eternals, we thank Jim publicly for his kindness and generosity to the Baseball Reliquary over the years, and our thoughts are with him today. Our second award was established in 2002 to recognize individuals for their commitment to the preservation of baseball history. The Tony Ceylan Memorial Award is named in honor of a great reliquarian, a baseball author, historian, and archivist who passed away in 2001 at the age of 49. Tony is dearly missed by all of those closely involved with the reliquary, and he is fondly remembered for his dedication to the study and research of unsung ball players and forgotten aspects of baseball history, which he felt were important to document and keep alive for future generations. As has been the case for each year since the award's inception, Tony Ceylan's brother Doug has driven down from San Francisco to Pasadena to be here for the awards presentation. And today Doug is joined by his son Zach and his friend Kim Shuck, who, as the 7th Poet Laureate for the city of San Francisco, recently curated a wonderful baseball poetry program at the San Francisco Public Library in conjunction with the Baseball Reliquary's exhibition, A Game of Color, the African American Experience in Baseball. So a special thank you to Doug, Zach, and Kim for once again taking part in our ongoing celebration of Tony's memory. The 2018 Sailin Award recipient, Ross Altman, is the first musician to receive the award. With an MA degree in speech from UC Santa Barbara and a PhD in English from SUNY Binghamton, he began a career as a college professor before deciding to make his living as a troubadour, or as Ross describes it, he left the classroom for the stage only to turn the stage into a classroom. Calling himself a singer-songwriter, Ross sings old labor songs, anti-war songs, civil rights songs, topical protest songs, traditional songs, love songs, Jewish songs in Yiddish and English, and original songs that carry on that tradition. He grew up on the folk music of Woody Guthrie, Lead Belly, Pete Seeger, Burl Ives, Theodore Bickel, Josh White, Big Bill Brunzi, Billie Holiday, and later on Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Phil Oakes, Tom Paxton, and Malvina Reynolds. You definitely have there a great starter list for a musical equivalent of the Shrine of the Eternals. For the past 30 years, Ross has been inspired to pay homage to his own heroes of the national pastime. And he has written and performed songs about Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, Sandy Koufax, Mickey Mantle, Phil Necro, and Roger Clemens, as well as Shrine of the Eternals inductees Jackie Robinson, Jimmy Pearsall, Steve Bilko, Vin Scully, and Pete Rose. In addition to releasing a CD collection of some of his baseball songs entitled The National Pastime, copies of which are available for sale today at the table in the back, Ross has performed at many venues, including public libraries, at past induction ceremonies for the Shrine of the Eternals, and at the John Anson Ford Amphitheater in Los Angeles, where he was a featured artist in the Baseball Reliquary's now legendary 2004 program, Legacies Baseball from Flatbush to the City of Angels. Ross is president of the Santa Monica Traditional Folk Music Club and writes a regular column for Folkworks magazine, Southern California's voice for folk music, dance, and related folk arts. In 2016, Folkworks named Ross as the inaugural recipient of its Lifetime Achievement Award called the Standing Ovation Award, which recognizes individuals for their contributions to the folk music community. He is, without a doubt, one of the real cultural treasures in Los Angeles. As we unveil the 2018 Tony Ceylan Memorial Award, please join me in welcoming its most deserving recipient, Ross Altman.
Thank you so much, Terry. These remarks are dedicated to Doug Sailin, Tony's brother, and his friend Kim Shuck, Poet Laureate of San Francisco, both of whom are here, as well as Doug's son, Zach, who's also here. 17 years ago, that's when Tony Ceylan passed away. July 31st, 2001. So I'm proud to be number 17 today. Number 17, that was also Dizzy Dean's number. So I'm doubly proud to be doubly 17, number 17 today. My next door neighbor growing up in the 1950s and early 60s was the rifleman, Chuck Connors, a gracious star who always made me feel at home when as a young boy I came over to visit. He played catch with me, but I never knew he had been a Major League Baseball player with the Brooklyn Dodgers and basketball player. He was 6'5" with the Boston Celtics. Before becoming the rifleman, I never knew because he never told me. And the only reason I know this now is because he was one of baseball's forgotten heroes, celebrated in Tony Ceylan's groundbreaking book. The only reason I know about the one-armed wonder, Pete Gray, who played during the fateful summer of '42, is because he too was one of baseball's forgotten heroes, who tried to enlist in the war and was turned down because he was an amputee, and got picked up by the St. Louis Browns, and said so memorably, if they only knew how hard I had to work to play baseball, they would know I would have had no trouble picking up a rifle. Once again, something I know only because of Tony Sailin, and how Pete Gray's glove, his left-hand glove for a right-hand outfielder, is in baseball's Hall of Fame, even though he played only one season. Another of those overlooked players and unsung heroes Tony sang about. This is therefore a great honor, the Tony Sailin Memorial Award. And I want to thank Terry Cannon for making me the first musician to receive it. That is truly welcome. And I want to accept it on behalf of my own songwriting heroes, Bob Dylan, who wrote Catfish for Catfish Hunter, and the late great Steve Goodman, who wrote A Dying Cub Fan's Last Request, and John Fogerty, who wrote Center Field, which along with the National Anthem of baseball songs from 1908, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, by Jack Norworth and Albert von Tilzer, is in the Hall of Fame. And finally, Paul Simon, who wrote Where Have You Gone, Joe DiMaggio? Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Robinson. For songs are the people's history, in Howard Zinn's wonderful phrase and book title. And Tony Sailin was a people's historian who, like Steve Goodman, passed away too soon. Born January 9, 1952, only 49 years old. Leaving so many readers wanting more. The Baseball Reliquary, like Tony Sailin himself, has made it their mission to find and honor overlooked and forgotten heroes of America's past time. I am grateful to have added a few contemporary folk songs to this tradition. Thank you, Terry and Mary. Here's a new song for today's inductees. Nice guys finish first. Leo DeRocher famously said, nice guys finish last. Flying spikes taking off his head, but the Georgia Peaches day is past. From Ty Cobb to from Ty Cobb to Rusty Staub to Bernard Malamud's Roy Hobbs. Leo the Lip may be wrong. They may not be as cursed to always do their worst. I can prove it with a song. From Tommy John to Nancy Faust, nice guys finish first. Nice guys finish first in the Baseball Reliquary. Their bubble doesn't always burst in the shrine of the Eternal's thirst to elevate the legendary. Even in the cemetery, nice guys finish first. Tommy John surgery. His practice coast to coast. His ligaments made history when they thought his arm was toast. He came back better than ever, won 20 games, 3 times strong. They thought that he would never pitch again, but Tommy proved them wrong. Nice guys finish first in the Baseball Reliquary. Their bubble doesn't always burst in the shrine of the Eternal's thirst to elevate the legendary, even in the cemetery. Nice guys finish first. Nancy Faust never phoned it in when she was at the organ. She celebrated every win and highlighted each misfortune. When the Southside Hitmen demolished an opponent. So here's for Nancy, nothing fancy, just a good old White Sox cry. When the Southside Hitmen demolished an opponent, it was na-na, hey, hey, kiss 'em goodbye. Nice guys finish first in the Baseball Reliquary. Their bubble doesn't always burst in the shrine of the Eternal's thirst to elevate the legendary, even in the cemetery. Nice guys finish first. Rusty Staub hit 500 with 4 different teams. His bat was locked and loaded. The redhead or the grand orange left-hand swing exploded. But it wasn't only for on-the-field exploits that Rusty should be sung, but his New York police and fire, widows and children's benefit fund. Nice guys finish first in the Baseball Reliquary. Their bubble doesn't always burst in the shrine of the Eternal's thirst to elevate the legendary, even in the cemetery. Because according to Terry and Mary, nice guys finish first. Thank you very much.
In 2003, Ross Altman was inspired to write a song about Jackie Robinson when Ross was invited to sing at the book release party for Lester Rodney's Press Box Red. Lester was the sports editor for the Daily Worker, the newspaper of the American Communist Party, and he had campaigned for the integration of Major League Baseball in the 1930s, long before the mainstream media had picked up the charge. Lester Rodney also delivered one of the most memorable lines in the now 20-year history of the Shrine of the Eternals. In 2005, Lester was inducted into the Shrine along with Jackie Robinson and the great USC baseball coach Rod Dedeaux. Both nonagenarians were in attendance. Lester Rodney at age 94 and Rod Dedeaux at age 91. When it came time for the 94-year-old Rodney to offer his acceptance remarks, he walked to this lectern, looked down wistfully at Rod Dedeaux, and remarked, to be 91 again. Always one of the most eagerly anticipated speeches at the Shrine of the Eternal's Induction Day is the Keynote Address, which this year will be delivered by award-winning journalist, author, historian, and raconteur Dan Epstein. The decision as to who to invite to deliver the 2018 Keynote Address was a real no-brainer, as it turned out. Once the Shrine voting results were announced in May, and we realized that our 3 inductees all achieved some of their most significant career milestones in the 1970s, we immediately contacted Dan. As the author of the acclaimed books Big Hair and Plastic Grass, A Funky Ride Through Baseball and America in the Swinging 70s, and Stars and Strikes, Baseball and America in the Bicentennial Summer of '76, Dan is the go-to guy for any deep dives into that most colorful and tumultuous decade of the 1970s and its overlap with American popular culture. Dan is a regular contributor to Rolling Stone, Revolver, the Jewish Daily Forward, and October, and has written for the Baseball Digest, Vice Sports, the Hardball Times, and dozens of other publications. He has also appeared in several baseball documentaries, including the wonderful No-No, a documentary, The Bird, The Swingin' A's, and Lenny Randle, the most interesting man in baseball. A resident of Southern California for over 20 years, Dan moved back to his former home of Chicago in 2015 and fully credits his return for the Cubs' resurgence and eventual world championship. He lives on the north side with his wife, Katie, their cats, Oscar and Otis, and possibly way too many books and records. And not that he needs any more street cred among reliquarians, but Dan's home office contains a shrine to legendary Detroit Tigers pinch hitter Gates Brown, with whom he shares a birthday. We think you will agree that we made the right selection for our 2018 keynote speaker, so please welcome to the lectern, direct from the Windy City, Dan Epstein.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you all for coming. This is my first Shrine of the Eternals induction event. When I lived in LA, I always seemed to be out of town whenever this was happening. And now that I live in Chicago, I get to come to one, so that's pretty beautiful. Also, I would like to apologize to anyone who expected the author of a book called Big Hair and Plastic Grass to actually have big hair. Summers in Chicago, man. It's I don't know how Oscar Gamble or Jose Cardenal did it, but I had to cut them off. Well, it's a great honor to be here, and what I'd like to talk about today are the concepts of joy, magic, and weirdness, which are things that really have played into my baseball fandom, and I believe these are themes that the Reliquary helps to popularize in terms of our study of baseball. The writer Cliff Corcoran once wrote that the relationship between fathers and sons is baked into baseball's mythology as well as reality. And it's true, I do owe my original burst of enthusiasm for baseball to my father. A New York Mets fan by way of the Brooklyn Dodgers, one of the first stories about baseball my father ever told me was about Mickey Owens' drop third strike in the 1941 World Series. So pretty much from that point on, I knew that things don't always go like you expect them to in baseball. He took me to my very first game, very first Major League game, which was May 30th, 1976 at Dodger Stadium. I saw Rusty Staub play right field for the Tigers. My dad was a big Rusty fan from his days with the Mets, but Rusty will always be a Tiger for me for getting to watch him in those days. I also got to see Billy Martin get thrown out of that game before the game even started. It's during the exchange of lineup cards, and I had no idea what was going on, and my dad was like, oh, they had an argument the night before and this is spilling over. Later I realized that Billy was probably really hungover from the night before and just wanted to get out of the ballpark as quickly as possible. But as much, for all my father's contributions to the cause of me becoming a baseball fan, my childhood immersion in the game was really a family affair. My mother grew up a Milwaukee Braves fan, and probably with some prompting, she can still recite the entire 1957 Braves lineup. And she took me to Dodger games during the summers in the 70s that I spent with her in Los Angeles. She gave me Roger Angel's 5 Seasons for my 11th birthday, which is a huge, huge book for me still to this day. And when I was 12, she inadvertently checked out Joe Pepitone's autobiography for me from the LA Public Library. It's also a major book for me, but for entirely different reasons. My sister was a willing partner in my growing baseball obsession. She was quite willing to play catch with me, despite taking probably way too many attempted Tommy John-style sinkers on the chin. And she happily traded baseball card doubles with me whenever I'd go to the drugstore to pick up some new packs. I'd always give her the extra Bucky Dents I had, and so we had a lot of fun with that. Also, I was lucky enough as a baseball-crazed kid to have grandparents who lived on different sides of the country. My father's folks lived both in San Diego and Long Island during my childhood, which meant that I got to see Randy Jones and Raleigh Fingers pitch for the Padres, and Doc Ellis make one of his last MLB starts as a member of the Mets. It was also because of them that I got to meet the San Diego Chicken himself while he was doing a promotion for KGB radio in front of the San Diego Zoo. I was too shy to approach him. He was handing out postcards to everybody who came by. But my Grandma Ray, like the sweet little Jewish grandmother she was, she sort of coaxed me over. She said, "Go ahead, Dan, shake hands with the chicken." 41 years later, I hope to do the same later today. And then there was my Grandpa Fred, my mom's dad, who lived in Alabama, and so the summers I spent with him there, I got to watch nightly Atlanta Braves broadcasts at a time when most MLB teams were on TV, maybe 1 or 2 times a week at most. Grandpa Fred further fed my baseball Jones by introducing me to the Sporting News and Jim Bouton's Ball 4, and paying for my first set of baseball cleats. In the summer of 1977, while schmoozing with his golf pals at the 19th hole of his country club, Grandpa Fred handed me a copy of Sports Illustrated to keep me busy. The issue featured Peter Gammon's story, Chai, Oh My, which celebrated the fact that the Cubs and White Sox had somehow both managed to be in first place at the All-Star break, and detailed the ecstatic craziness afoot at both Wrigley Field and Comiskey Park. I had never been to Chicago at that point, but Gammon's article made it seem like the greatest place in the world, at least if you were a baseball fan. Little did I know that, less than 3 years later, I would be sitting in a box seat at Comiskey, enjoying my first ball game as a Chicago resident, and listening to Nancy Faust do her stuff on the Hammond organ. But my favorite Grandpa Fred story actually involves the one time, 40 years ago this summer, that he and I were able to attend a Major League Baseball game together. It was July 5th, 1978. Tommy John was pitching for the Dodgers against Adrian Devine of the Braves at Chavez Ravine. And on a beautiful, unseasonably cool summer night, Gramps and I took our seats high up in the reserve level along third base line, opened our bags of peanuts, and waited excitedly for the game to begin. At the time, the Braves were absolutely terrible, and with Tommy John on the mound, I figured this would be an easy win for the Dodgers. It certainly started that way. By the end of the third, the Dodgers were already up 7-0, thanks to some timely hitting from Ron Cey, Steve Garvey, and Joe Ferguson, and some stellar base running by Davey Lopes and Billy North. Meanwhile, Tommy John was pitching like Tommy John. Through the first 5 innings, he'd given up only 4 singles, hadn't walked a single batter, and he'd struck out 2 of them. The 13 other outs had all come on ground balls, including 2 infield double plays. In the bottom of the 5th, Joe Ferguson put the Dodgers up 8-0 with a solo shot off Jamie Easterly. My Grandpa Fred was now entirely out of peanuts and growing extremely bored by the minute with the slaughter that was unfolding before us. "What do you say we go soon?" he asked me. And while I've never been one to want to leave a ballpark before the final out, even I had to admit that this was getting kind of dull. "Okay, Gramps," I replied. "We can leave whenever you want." Well, Gramps had parked his Buick at the farthest reaches of the Dodger Stadium parking lot. Took us a while to get there, and then a further time to actually find the car. And by the time we got into it and switched on the radio, it was already the top of the 7th. The score was 8-3, and Tommy John was no longer pitching. The Braves had finally gotten to him in the top of the 6th, and Tommy Lasorda had pulled him for a young lefty reliever named Lance Rotson. Well, no big deal, I thought. No sense wasting your best starter when you're still up by 5, right? And indeed, Rotson sailed through the 7th and 8th innings, allowing 1 runner each inning, but no runs. We were not exactly sailing home, however. Gramps was not from LA, and when we left the park we left the parking lot at a different exit than we came in. He wound up in Chinatown and had absolutely no idea how to get back to the Fairfax district. He spent the 7th and 8th innings going in circles in and around downtown LA. Being only 12 years old and not an LA resident either, I wasn't really in any position to be of much help. "Where do you think we are, Dan?" he'd occasionally ask. "I don't know, Gramps," I'd reply, "but it still looks like Chinatown to me." Somewhere along the way, Gramps found Wilshire Boulevard, knew that if we took that west, we'd get home. So he turned west on it, and now we were back on track, but so were the Braves. With 1 out in the top of the 9th, they whacked 4 straight singles off Rotson, cutting the Dodgers' lead to 4 runs. With the bases loaded, Lasorda came in and called for the usually reliable Charlie Huff to take Rotson's place. But the knuckleballer didn't have the goods that night. He immediately walked Gary Matthews to make it 8-5, and then the Braves scored another run when Steve Garvey bobbled a Cito Gaston grounder to first. Huff fanned Bob Horner for the 2nd out, but a young catcher named Dale Murphy followed with a 2-run game-tying single. Out went Huff, in came Terry Forster, who promptly gave up an RBI single to Barry Bonnell, and the Braves had a 9-8 lead. Grandpa Fred just whistled in amazement, while I sat there in stunned silence. Forster finally stopped the bleeding by getting Pat Rocket to fly out to Vic Davalillo, who then led off the bottom of the 9th against Braves fireman Gene Garber, who was now gunning for a save that had seemed like a complete and utter impossibility just an inning earlier. Garber got the veteran utility man to pop to second, and the Dodgers sent Rick Monday up to pinch hit for Teddy Martinez, who had likewise entered the game as a defensive sub, back when it looked like everything was already in the bag. Right as Grandpa Fred turned off Wilshire and onto La Jolla, Monday flied out to Matthews and right. We were now a block from home. Steve Garvey stepped to the plate, representing the Dodgers' final hope. And right as we pulled into the driveway, Garvey hit a soft fly ball to center that landed in the glove of Roland Office for the final out. The game was over. The Braves had come back to win it 9-8. Grandpa Fred turned off the ignition, and I just sat there in the front seat, unsure whether to laugh or cry. I learned a number of valuable lessons that night, not just of the Yogi Berra, it ain't over till it's over variety. I learned that just because one team looks significantly better on paper than another, it doesn't guarantee that the lesser team won't find a way to win. I learned that late-inning defensive substitutions can sometimes backfire. And I learned that it's not worth getting too upset about a mid-season loss, no matter how momentarily heartbreaking. Come the middle of August, the 1978 Dodgers would seize first place in the NL West and stay there for the rest of the season, on their way to their second straight appearance in the World Series. But as I've gotten older, my memories of that 1978 game have taught me something else, that sometimes the experience of the game is more important than the outcome. Certainly, I've been to hundreds of ball games since then, but there are very few that I remember as vividly or as fondly as the one game that I got to see in the company of my beloved grandfather. I've witnessed walk-off home runs, near no-hitters, acrobatic game-saving catches, triple plays, streakers racing across the outfield. But none of those things really match the joy, the magic, and the weirdness of getting lost in the dark and empty streets of downtown Los Angeles with my grandfather and listening to the game we just left turned completely upside down. Joy, magic, and weirdness. Those are the things that have brought us all here today. We love numbers in baseball. We use them to measure, analyze, and debate the players that we see before us, as well as the players of the past. But there are no numbers that can fully quantify the magic of seeing Mark the Bird Fidrich pitch in the summer of 1976, or the life-affirming joy that he brought to the fans of Detroit. Numbers cannot fully measure the weirdness of Louis Tiant's windups, or Bill Lee's Leafus pitch, or Doc Ellis's LSD no-hitter, or the nightmare-inducing image of Dave Parker chugging around the bases in a hockey mask. And likewise, there are no stats with which one can fully gauge just how much Rusty Staub meant to the people of New York City, or any of the other cities he played in, or just how much Nancy Faust means to the sports fans of Chicago, or just how drastically Tommy John's willingness to bravely undergo an experimental surgery impacted the game as we know it. And that's why the Baseball Reliquary is so important, because it's not about the numbers here. It's about celebrating our memories and experiences, our personal connections to the complex fabric of the game, and the mark the game has left on our equally complex society. As baseball prepares to lumber into the third decade of the 21st century, I confess that I'm finding significantly less joy, magic, or weirdness in the game than I once did. Maybe I'm put off by the increased emphasis on launch angles and home runs, which has come at the expense of every other offensive tactic. Maybe it's the replay review system, which has become to baseball what Pro Tools and digital filters are to music, steamrolling the spontaneous poetry of the moment with our relentless quest for perfection. Maybe it's the ever-escalating ticket prices, or the new mound visits remaining counter, which may be the silliest stat to ever win a permanent spot on the scoreboard. But in the dark and troubling times such as these, it becomes more important than ever to connect with what joy, magic, and even weirdness you can find wherever and however you can. Whatever my misgivings about the current state of our country and the world, I still feel lucky to be able to watch the latest Javi Baez highlight reel on a near daily basis. Whenever I enter a ballpark, I still savor that same sense of adrenalized joy I felt upon seeing the bright green grass of Tiger Stadium for the first time. And whenever I get fed up with the present-day version of the game, I can always soothe my soul by immersing myself in its past, in the quirks of its myriad characters, in the roller coaster rides of its thrilling pennant races, and in its bottomless well of incredible stories. These are the things that the Baseball Reliquary helps keep alive for us, and all of us here today are significantly better off for it. Long live the Baseball Reliquary. Long may we all play ball, and may we somehow find a way to truly become one nation under a groove. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Here's an interesting factoid related to the Shrine of the Eternals. To the best of our knowledge, there have been 3 people who have attended all 20 of the shrine induction ceremonies. 2 of those are yours truly and my wife, Mary. The 3rd person is longtime reliquarian Julianne Pollak. Julian recently shared with us a photo of his program from the inaugural ceremony in 1999, signed by Doc Ellis. And as a way of thanking Julian for his support over the years, and in the hopes that he will continue this tradition for another 20 years, we have a little gift for him. So Julian, could you come up to the stage? As some of you may know, the Reliquary is famous for its $2 trivia quizzes, which we often present at reliquary events and gatherings. And incidentally, the $2 trivia quiz was the brainchild of another longtime reliquarian, Sam James, who came up with the concept because it's not very easy anymore to get $2 bills at the bank, and not many people carry them around these days. So since Julian will likely now be the subject of a future $2 trivia question, name the only rank-and-file reliquarian to have attended every shrine induction ceremony, we thought he should receive, what else? A ceremonial $2 bill. Here you are, Julian. Thank you for your continued support. As a special treat and in keeping with the 70s-centric vibe of this year's ceremony, we have invited Ted Giannoulis, known throughout the world of baseball as the San Diego Chicken, to be a guest speaker this afternoon. The Chicken is no newcomer to this stage, having been inducted in 2011 along with Pete Gray and Maury Wills. By way of introducing the Chicken, I'll let one of our finest wordsmiths, Chris Erskine of the Los Angeles Times, handle that task. You see, Chris, as the voice of the fan, received the Hildo Award in 2011 and wrote about the experience in one of his columns. He began, and I quote, "I was listening to the San Diego Chicken give a speech the other day, and he raised some excellent points about sports and the state of the nation such that it is. The Chicken sounded good, especially considering that he had just flown in that morning. Describing himself as the Minnie Minoso of mascots, he talked about his 5 decades in the game and how he thought baseball has the greatest sense of humor of any sport. Baseball is the only sport where you can still hear the squeal of children in the stands," he went on to say, drawing more knowing nods. "After all these years, I still get a charge when I first spot the San Diego Chicken. That same visceral reaction you get when you see a very pregnant woman walking down the sidewalk, her innie now and outie. You poke who's ever next to you, 'Hey, look,' as if you're about to witness a miracle. Pay attention. I don't know that this overstuffed bird quite qualifies as a miracle, but he is a blessing, a gift, and, when turned slowly over a spit, one of the tastiest summer meals you could ever hope for. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ted Giannoulis, the San Diego Chicken."
pleasure to be here again, everyone. It's great to be among friends. Fantastic. And for the record, I don't mind if people eat those other chickens, you know? It helps eliminate my competition. If you can't beat them, eat them. But we're here. I've been asked to just say a few remarks to help celebrate our new inductees today. And it dawned on me, thinking about it, that today's inductees share a bond of firsts. Have you realized that? Now, we obviously know about Tommy John and the surgery, and that he was the first, and it revolutionized sports and athletes as we know it, to extend careers and such. And one of the things Dr. Job, I should add, did not disturb and did not need fixing was Tommy John's funny bone. That is a funny man, as you will hear today, I'm sure. And then there's Nancy. Nancy was the first to really demonstrate how the organ could be a real effective, useful instrument to enhance the enjoyment of a ball game. And with her creative playing and everything, it just presaged today's idea of walk-up music for the batters. But she was able to demonstrate more than anything else that it could be a really glorious moment in games to really embellish the entertainment aspect for the fans. And then finally, there was Rusty Staub. Now, not only was he the first star of the Astros, but when he came to Canada, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. He was the first bona fide star of Canadian baseball that really advanced the game. Now, I was a kid growing up in London, Ontario, Canada at the time, and let me tell you the excitement Le Grand Orange brought to the game for all of us. And so he was truly the first superstar of Canada in baseball, so much so, he approached the level of sainthood with Jean Beliveau of the Montreal Canadiens. And that was saying something back in the day. So, you know, I got to thinking as well, you know, what would be my first? What was my defining moment, you know, in my career? And I got to thinking about it, and it was the first time I had ever been invited to go on the field. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote about it. And it was in May of 1977. The San Diego Padres called me up. Ballard Smith, I was working for a radio station in San Diego. And he called me up and he says, Teddy, we're going to do something special tonight at tonight's game against the Astros. It's jacket night. We're going to have 40,000 kids there, or 40,000 people, a lot of kids. And we want you to go on the field and do something funny at the end of the fifth inning when they're dragging the field. And you have to understand, everyone, this was unprecedented. Heretofore, in about 3 or 4 year career that I had at that point, I had only done stuff in the grandstands. But here was the team officially asking me to go on the field and do some chicken shtick, so to speak. I asked Ballard, what do you want me to do? He says, I don't know. You think of it. You know, you're supposed to be the funny guy. Well, the rest of the day, I just racked my brain. My bird brain could not come. I could not come up with a single thought at all. I was dumbfounded. It came right to the game, right to the fifth inning. I even turned to my assistant, have you got anything? He says, I got nothing. So comes the end of the fifth inning. I hopped the railing in left field, right by the Padre bullpen out at Jack Murphy Stadium. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm just drawing a blank. But I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to run to the diamond there and think of something. So as I start jogging on the field, the fans are going nuts. The chicken's on the field. They're going to kill him. It's going to get nuts. But they're laughing, and I'm running, and I still can't think of anything. And then I see the third base umpire, Art Williams, okay? And he turned to see what the commotion was all about, and he had a smile that was shinier than the moon that night. And Art, by the way, also shares a first in this story because he's the first black National League umpire. But there he was on the field, and I'm thinking, aha, a friendly face. I'll go up to him, I'll think of something, I don't know what, but I still don't know what to do. So as I walk up to him, I extend my hand to shake his. And ladies and gentlemen, the moment his hand touched mine, it came to me right there, right there. I'm thinking, okay, as we're shaking hands, I'm going to walk away and pretend he doesn't let go of his grip, and he trips me up onto the ground. And so while I'm shaking hands, I say, Mr. Umpire, don't mind me. I'm just going to goof with you here for just a second. So he lets go of his grip, but I don't let go of mine. And so as I walk away, I pantomime that he's jerked me back. I fall to the ground. The fans are screaming, the umpire just tripped up the chicken. So I collect myself off the ground, and I decide I'm going to do my best improvisational Billy Martin right there. What's the big idea? I come out here to say hi, and you trip me up, and now I'm ranting and raving and jumping up and down, like a chicken with his head cut off, so to speak. And Art, he's all perplexed. He doesn't know what to do. I saw him turn to his first base umpire mate, the crew chief, Lee Wire, going, did you put him up to this? Kind of signaling across the diamond. And Lee just puts up his hand, don't look at me, I got nothing to do with this. So I'm ranting and raving, and the fans are going absolutely bonkers. And so finally I'm thinking, how do I finish this? I don't know how, but then it came to me in a split second. In that moment, as fans are going berserk, I finally stop, and I turn, and I give him the raised leg salute, like a dog going on a fire hydrant, okay? And I bolted off the field to a thunderous laughter. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, it must have shaken the Richter scale. It was incredible. And it was a moment that really kind of changed and defined the rest of my career. So I'm thinking, wow, this is really super. And so as the rest of the evening goes on, I'm just basking in the glory. Oh, I can't wait to see this film. Oh, myself. Oh, this is so great. Well, Ballard Smith calls me up the next day, and he says, Teddy, what you did out there was fabulous, fantastic. The feedback we're getting from our fans is nutso. And I said, well, thank you. But Ballard said, we just had one problem. Our camera jammed. Can you do it again tonight? Well, of course, any comedian never repeats a joke twice in a row, so I couldn't do it. But it became a permanent part of my repertoire for the future. And so I just wanted to share my own personal firsts with the three inductees today who also have firsts in their careers. But you know what? Just let me add this in closing here for our inductees. They're also first today as well, because they're first in our hearts. So salute to our new inductees. Thank you. Woo!
If you came into the library this afternoon through the north entrance, you may have noticed the exhibit of all 57 Shrine of the Eternals inductee plaques from 1999 through 2017 in the display cases. One of those plaques for Jimmy Pearsall created quite a stir when Jimmy was inducted in 2001. The plaque incorporates a pink acrylic plastic, which was selected by yours truly and Bill Scaff, who came up with the original design scheme for the plaques back in 1999. The inspiration for the color choice was the 1958 and 1959 Topps baseball cards, a number of which featured pink backgrounds, and which left quite an impression on me as a child. And then, of course, there were the slabs of pink bubble gum that were inserted into each wax pack of cards. Now here's the 1959 Chico Fernandez card. And here is the 1959 Bob Gibson card. For crying out loud, I figured if a guy like Bob Gibson was okay with pink, Jimmy Pearsall would be as well. When Jimmy laid his eyes on the plaque, the first words from his mouth were, "It's fucking pink." While he wasn't too thrilled at first, it is our understanding that Jimmy warmed up to the plaque in time. His stepson reported that Jimmy hung the plaque in his bathroom, where he kept his most cherished awards and honors. He said his stepfather enjoyed giving people something nice to look at while they were sitting on his toilet. I do want to ensure our 2018 inductees, however, that they will find no pink on their plaques as they are unveiled today. And now it is time to commence with the induction of our 2018 electees to the Shrine of the Eternals and the unveiling and presentation of the inductee plaques. The three individuals that we honor today were elected by the membership of the Baseball Reliquary in voting conducted in April, and they received the highest number of votes from a ballot consisting of 50 candidates. 2 identical plaques have been assembled in honor of each inductee, one which is presented to the inductee and one which becomes part of the permanent collection of the Baseball Reliquary and is used for exhibition purposes. Our first inductee, Nancy Faust, will be introduced by retired newspaper columnist Mike Downey. Mike began his newspaper career at the age of 14 and has been a columnist in news, entertainment, and sports for the Los Angeles Times, Detroit Free Press, Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Daily News, and the Chicago Tribune. He has been selected National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association Sports Writer of the Year 11 times. He has also been a columnist for the Sporting News, Sport Magazine, and Inside Sports. And our literary and pop culture aficionados will appreciate the fact that Mike even made an appearance as a character in the late Elmore Leonard's 1999 crime novel, Be Cool. Please welcome Mike Downey.
He'll never love you the way that I love you, 'cause if he did, oh no, he wouldn't make you cry. He might be thrilling, baby, but my love's so doggone willing. So kiss him, go on and kiss him goodbye. Na 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 na, na 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 na, hey hey hey, goodbye. It's just. The great groups, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Steam. So iconic. Look at how cute they're all in a steam bath. It's a collector's item. I spent over $3.95 to get this from Amazon. I figure the Beatles did 100 memorable songs and the Rolling Stones 50 memorable songs. So between them, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, and his team came up with 151 memorable songs for us. And Nancy Faust immortalized it and got a own gold record out of it. We're here today to pay tribute to Tommy John, Legrand Orange, and Legrand Blonde. You know, in 1970 or so, I thought organ music was for squares. I thought it was for roller rinks, somebody playing alley cat. Then I began to hear about this Nancy Faust, who was playing at White Sox games. But she was playing Motown and Doobie Brothers and Three Dog Night and Iron Butterfly, and that sounded pretty cool. There's a phrase you don't hear very often, and that's cool organist. I remember asking people about her, and they said, oh, Nancy's so nice, Nancy's so sweet. And I said, I'm maybe not that cool. And then that's before I met her and found out she was driving around Chicago in a white Corvette. I met her because I was covering Chicago Bulls basketball, and back in the years before Michael Jordan made anybody want to watch Chicago Bulls basketball. And good seats were, available. Well, you know how the organists sometimes sit way up in the rafters, like in the movie Slapshot, where he's up in the upper deck but still gets hit in the head with a puck? Well, you know where Nancy sat at Bulls basketball games? On courtside. They had the organ right there in the corner of the court. So the chicken would bring certain finesse and cleverness to mascot moments at Bulls games in front of a huge crowd of 4,000 or 5,000 people. They had a kid named Jeff who sat in a folding chair looking very much like Chris Christie at the beach. And he had a white T-shirt with a Superman logo on it. I think he did, didn't he? Certainly. And during a timeout, fans were treated to Nancy Faust playing the 1812 Overture, better known as the Lone Ranger theme to some, while Superfan ran a lap around the stadium in a sophisticated entertainment as fans threw crumpled cups at him and tried to trip him. That was the kind of sophisticated entertainment that Nancy helped bring us in Chicago. But it was with the White Sox where she truly became a star. The diamond action wasn't all that dazzling sometimes, but above the field, it was a nonstop party. Up above, we had Bill Veeck, who was the P.T. Barnum of baseball. We had Harry Carey, who was the Foster Brooks of baseball. We had Jimmy Pearsall, who was the Randall P. McMurphy of baseball. All they needed was a young blonde accomplice. So I wasn't sure because, again, Nancy was nice, not naughty, except one of the sweet people got known worldwide for a song that made fun of the pitcher when he got taken out of the game, which I just loved. The San Diego Padres organist Bobby Cressy said in an interview once that Nancy was one of the first ones, if not the first, to play rock and roll. But then when she would do na na na, hey, 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 goodbye, when a pitcher was taken out, it was a little cheeky. I thought the same thing. She got away with that. That 77 team was as entertaining as any team you'd want to be around. They were so much fun. And at the Sun-Times at the time, we were having such a good time with it, especially the columnist. We had Ron Rapoport was a columnist there who went on to write for the LA Daily News. He's written several books about sports and showbiz, and he's got a biography coming out in a few months of Ernie Banks that I think you're all going to love. And we had John Julianne, who went on to write for major television shows. He created the character of Xena the Warrior Princess. He's written novels. He's got a book coming out soon, an anthology of sports writing that I think you're going to love. And they wrote up a storm about those White Sox teams. And I wanted to bring them out. I wanted to mention them because they're not only two of the best, but they're sitting right there, Ron Rapoport and John Julianne. So then came 1979 and Disco Demolition Night, which was fun in its own way, including the second game of a doubleheader being forfeited by the White Sox because 50,000 disco records were exploded between games. And as the fans chanted, "Disco sucks," some nuns sitting nearby said, "What are they saying?" And Nancy said, "They're saying, go White Sox." Okay. There's a writer and an author and a blogger named Beth Fink. And Beth found out in 1985, in her 20s, that she was going blind. And she would come to the games with her husband and thinking she can't enjoy baseball anymore, but she'd still come and he would try to describe the action to her. And she said, I bet I could tell what's happening just from listening to Nancy Faust. So if there was a play, if she heard Nancy playing Johnny Cash's I Walk the Line, she knew the batter had walked. And if she was playing Michael Jackson's Somebody Watching Me, the pitcher had thrown over to first base. So she had moments herself that she just brought to fans up there that you wouldn't even be able to appreciate how someone who was just an organist meant to the people of Chicago. Beth's husband said that his favorite walk-up song of Nancy's was for Gary DiSarcina, because Nancy played the Shialites' Have You Seen Her? For Henry Blanco, she played A Wider Shade of Pale, and she had some amazing ones. For 40 years, she played just about every song that you could play, except she was from Chicago, so the one song she couldn't play was We Are the Champions. And then came 2005, and the diamond rings on the fingers of White Sox players and the one hanging from the neck of Nancy Faust right now, they gave her one of the World Championship rings in 2005. After which she played at the parade alongside the road, and then she played with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, playing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Then came 2010 and retirement. I don't know what other organists get, but Nancy Faust got 10,000 bobblehead dolls. And she threw out the first pitch, and they had a feature story in the Sunday New York Times on her. And when she got home, she had a personal letter waiting from a White Sox fan, the 44th President of the United States. In 2015, the White Sox held a charity auction, so Nancy put up her organ. She was literally an organ donor. So Josh Cantor was quoted as saying, the single most important musical instrument in the history of baseball is now up for sale. Josh is the organist of the Boston Red Sox, and the winning bidder for the organ is him. He now owns it. Dieter Ruhl, who now is the organist for the Dodgers, he admired Helen Dell and Nancy Heffley, but he said it was Nancy Faust who influenced him from the kind of songs she played. And so now if Alex Wood's on the mound, he plays Norwegian Wood, or if Kenta Maeda is there, he plays House of the Rising Sun. Nancy played too many tunes to mention here, but on her final performance at the White Sox game, she played This Used to Be My Playground from the movie A League of Their Own. Ladies and gentlemen, in A League of Her Own, Nancy Faust.
My head's going to explode. Thank you, Mike. What a privilege to be a friend of Mike, and what a privilege to be up here among all those names and all these people. And I think I have to pinch myself. Yes, it's really happening. Well, when I first shared the exciting news about this award with my husband, Joe, he was a bit skeptical. You're being honored by a reliquarium? Sounds fishy. No, Joe, it's called the Reliquary. So we did a little digging, and we learned a lot. We now understand Terry Cannon's mission We've seen the many familiar names of candidates and inductees over the last 20 years. We know each one has a story to tell. Everyone has a unique contribution and are deserving of recognition. Now I understand. And for me, this is a big deal. So I'm humbled to be here. And thank you. So I was asked to give a brief overview of my story. To make it interesting, I thought I would tell you about my connection with a couple of baseball legends. Not too steamy or anything, but you just might like to hear. I really didn't know how to condense 41 years of baseball and 3,000 plus games, although I did have to miss 5 when our son Eric was born. Not his fault. Just bad timing. Though my birth, on the other hand, was timed perfectly, because 4 years after that, my folks purchased an organ, which was an instrument that was becoming quite popular, kind of replacing accordion, what Mike Downey used to play over here. Was placing because it was so versatile, and my mother is a musician, and she just added that to her list of many instruments that she played. So I guess I inherited her ear, never really mastered reading music, but I was picking up simple tunes, much to my tone-deaf father's delight. And my dad, though, was so overjoyed to hear me play any little simple thing, and in order to assure that I would stick with music, he struck a pretty good deal. My first love, and I begged for a horse. I just loved horses because I watched Annie Oakley and Dale Evans, and I wanted a horse. Well, he said, I can't buy you the horse, but if you stick with organ, I'll let you take an occasional horseback riding lesson. So his strategy worked, took a lot of lessons, and eventually I found myself playing for my own enjoyment as well as that of others. And my dad, he was pretty enterprising. He was an immigrant from Sweden, I might say, and I'm proud to say that. But he realized that there was a demand now for the organ among professional musicians when live music was king. And it's an instrument you couldn't bring, but you wanted to play at a bar or someplace that featured live music. So he found himself in the rental business. He acquired 15 B3s, very much like this model, and he just rented them by the day, by the week, or by the month, and had a nice little business going in the 70s and 80s. Well, so I found myself following my mother's footsteps and playing for functions that wanted a little background music. I could play anything they wanted to hear. So one I was most fortunate to play for was a banquet that was attended by the late Stu Holcomb. And Stu was the general manager of the White Sox at the time. And he liked what he heard. And even though I didn't really have a baseball background, I had been to one game my entire life. But Stu, he offered me the job. And there was only really one special request, and that was in the form of a roster of of our players, with each player's home state. And he asked if as they approached the bat or the base, if I could just play their home state song to make them feel at home. And that was a piece of cake for me. And by the way, if I did have a problem, there was a telephone at the organ, and I could phone home if I anticipated a song I may not know. And I called my mom, and she could hum a few bars, and I could pull it off. I think that this award today would make Stu especially proud, because shortly after he hired me, there was a petition circulating saying that my position would better be filled by a male. And that's probably because the 2 organists that preceded me were both men. And one little factoid is that the first organist was hired by Bill Veeck when Bill Veeck first owned the team, but he moved out here to play for the Angels for many years, and that was the late Shea Torrent. So he was my predecessor and a really great organist. But another decision that was made by Stu Holcomb in order to boost attendance was the hiring of a super salesman, fun-loving sportscaster. Mike mentioned his name, that was Harry Carey. And he already had a well-known reputation from his days with the St. Louis Cardinals for many years prior to his coming to the White Sox. And his broadcasts were so popular that even I, at the organ in the center field bleachers, brought a little radio so that I could listen to what he had to say. And I can vividly recall the first time that Harry ever made reference, or anybody ever made reference to my music on the airwaves. Harry was moaning about the length of the game. If they don't pick up the speed, they're going to have to wake me up. This is just dragging too long. They're going to have to wake me up and carry me out of here. When I heard that, it was just a knee-jerk reaction. Just played a few notes of "Carry Me Back to Old Virginia." Well, he took note of that, and he said, "Well, I don't know who that is, but well, even the organist someplace, even the organist agrees. This game's just." I had never met him. This was, but anyhow, he knew there was an organist playing it, and he said, listen to that. And then I probably followed with a few measures of "I'm Just Wild About Harry." And that put me on Harry's radar. He liked that. So whenever he'd talk about reasons to come out and have a good time and can't beat fun at the old ballpark, he included Nancy and the organ, as well as so many other aspects that the ballpark had to offer. And he even made a successful pitch to bring the organ. Once I met him and he knew who I was, he'd say, "Why don't we bring her in closer to the activities? She's out there in the desolate center field." That was successful. So the following year, the Sox did move me in. They removed 10 box seats directly behind home plate. And it was well received by surrounding fans. And it was really great for me because the fans so many of them were so knowledgeable, and they were able to give me so many tips and insight about players that I really didn't know, but could be reflected in song when they'd come up to bat. And they encouraged me, so I was emboldened, and I would do things. They would tell me things like players' nicknames. This guy is like the human rain delay, or somebody, a sledgehammer, or they'd say this player went out with Madonna. This player thought he was going out with a woman, Lucille. This player, another one, had hemorrhoid surgery. You can't sit down, Fortunately, in those days, I don't think the players were really paying much attention. I was there for the amusement of the fans. He might say, "Well, this pitcher, look at this, he just had surgery, elbow surgery, and here he is again, feeling stronger every day, Tommy John." So these are kind of things that was most helpful to have fans around me, just to get me going. And then I also had the advantage now that I was behind home plate of seeing the center field scoreboard with its many messages and announcements, and that always was a cue for something to play as well. So there was a lot of music going on, and eventually it seemed like every play, every player, everything going on in the stands, up in the air, just there was something you could notice that there was a possible response if I had the opportunity to play. And I guess eventually the bottom line is that my music kind of morphed into a game soundtrack. So it was a dimension of entertainment for some that were following what the music was. But I guess also the bottom line is that it was a sweet spot in time, and that I not only had the ability, but I had the opportunity to play because of all the downtime in a baseball game, which is now filled, because now we have Jumbotron, pre-recorded music, so I would never have been able to do what I did then, now. So it was a really sweet time in my life. But I want to talk to you about a second legend that entered the scene. Mike, you touched upon him too. And that was new owner, One Man Carnival, Bill Veck. And he just delighted the fans with countless surprises, gimmicks, promotions that all heightened the festive atmosphere. And my assignment was to just keep playing music that would reflect the theme. Well, we all know about Disco Demolition, because that went down, but there were many other themes that were a lot of fun and kept the fans engaged. There was Circus Day, the Anti-Superstition Night, Salute Your Local Union Night, parades, costumes, hula hoop marathons, Shriners. They had every ethnic group had a night complete with their anthem and the costumes and dancing, and every promotion seemed to include wacky door prizes, and it's like, maybe it'll be me, maybe it'll be me. Well, I want to tell you about one door prize that affected me till today. It was a promotion called Ragtime Night, and there was a door prize that nobody claimed. And remember that horse I begged for? Well, it wasn't exactly a horse, but her name was Rosita, and she was wonderful. And when she passed away, I got another one, and her name is Mandy, and I've enlisted Mandy to help me thank Terry Cannon and the Reliquary for my being here today, so I'll show you. This is Rosie's. This is Rosie's successor. So what I got from Bill was a donkey, actually, and it was a wonderful. So my artistry isn't too good, but there she is. So I'll put that here for Terry. It'd probably come as no surprise to most of you that it was Bill Vack that convinced Harry to take the microphone and lead everybody and take me out to the ball game. It truly became a highlight of our games, as well as a tradition when he moved to the north side and you heard him on the superstations. I mean, I imagine there's nobody here that hasn't heard Harry's rendition of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Wish he were here, but I thought this might be a good time for everybody to just stand and take a stretch. And I know, John, you might want to stand up. And my friends from Chicago, they don't like to sit more than an hour, so this might be a good time. I'll do my Take Me Out to the Ball Game, perhaps. And we can all sing, and then I'll just give you a few examples of the other kind of things you may have heard at a game. Okay? Okay, are we all ready? Ready. I really miss Harry now, because he said, all right, Nancy, let me hear ya. So, here we go. Who the player might be. All right? I'll do a few. Every player had like 3, 4, 5 good songs, so every time you came into bat, I'd change it up a little. But here's something you'd hear. Mike, there must have been a player whose first name was Green, because I know I used to play it. Sean? Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Okay, well, now that we're on colors, I'll do...
And then there were songs that, if you saw them on the scoreboard, it might make you think of another song, like the one for Ozzie Guillen. Anybody remember that song? Or there was a player named Vizquel. Or there was a player named Ducey, and that rhymes with I love Lucy. Okay, so sometimes it was a stretch. There was a player named, okay. Justice. The player's last name was Justice. You know, I just think my most valuable players are the ones with good names, and I just beam from Tommy, but I couldn't go home, and I only know when I hear a name and I play it right away, and then I forget. So it was all spontaneous. But here's a great one, and you won't guess who this is for unless you saw his name up on the scoreboard. Anybody know who that might have been? Oh, right, because Inagata Davida sounds just like Pete. Okay, and then sometimes it would be a series of songs because it was a dead time, and you know the manager, let's say Tony La Russa, comes out to the struggling pitcher. That would be Dave Stewart. So, okay, so I used to follow him as he walked out. And if he walked faster, and then as they talked, the two talked, get it? Tony La Russa, Ebony and Ivory. And if the conversation went on too long, well, then the manager goes back, and then Dave Stewart just keeps struggling. So the manager, and this time he comes out, and you know, it's curtains. And because he's a visiting pitcher, we could send him off feeling a little humiliated. I think it was like the beginning of the descent of civilness. Okay, just a few more examples of, well, sometimes a number on the back of somebody would be another thing I could use to play a song for. So I'll give you examples of numbers. I'll go 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. 1. That was 5. Play 5, and then it was Magnificent 7. game, you can't plan these things, but a game might be held up because something happens out on the field, like this. That's when the game had to stop because a cat ran across the field. Or, oh yeah, here's another reason the game had to stop. The guy lost the ball in the sun. They ran out and gave him this. Or an exuberant fan might just, Friday night, a lot of beer flowing, and he just kind of lost it. So he runs out into the field. Shouldn't do that, so I probably play like this. Let's see. That's Bad Boys, and when security finally catches up with them, you'd hear this. I fought the law. And then my last example would be another exuberant fan. And I was kind of ready for this because this had been a trend going on over the winter in the 70s. And I just thought this is going to happen. Another exuberant fan that jumped over the wall onto the field and had to be caught by security. And I played this. I think that was the end of my examples. So, And like you said, Mike, it had often been posed to me, well, gee, what song would you play for yourself? And I used to say, well, probably when I'm no longer at the park, it'll be something like, this used to be my playground, because it just provided the dream job for me. I was really in my wheelhouse doing what I felt like I was born to do. And though that song sounds like everything's in the past, I must say that the memories and the bonds and the life that we keep going with doesn't end. And so it didn't really end there, as you can see by my friends and the friends that I've kept and the bonds that were made. I've seen so many generations of families come and go. The beautiful thing about my position was that I was located out with the people, so that I was able to meet so many wonderful people, and I had the help to be successful. So thank you again. Thank you to the Reliquary.
Earlier, I had mentioned that the Shrine inductee plaques from 1999 through 2017 are on view in the north entrance display cases of this library through July 1st. I also would like to call your attention to other displays that are currently on view in the humanities and business wings of this library, which are at the east end of the library. In the business wing, we have a display of artworks by Greg Jazuski and Ben Sakaguchi, along with an homage to 2000 Shrine of the Eternals inductee Mo Berg, highlighted by our very own Mo Berg hologram, created by artists Daniel Newman and Matthew Schreiber. In the humanities wing is a wonderful collection of old baseball-related paper from the collection of Greg Jazuski, including a selection of covers from the New Yorker magazine from 1926 to the present, baseball covers, of course. We hope you will be able to visit those cases today prior to the library's closing at 5:00 p.m., and they'll be on display through the end of the month. The afternoon's second inductee will be Rusty Staub. Rusty's induction will be accepted by his sister, Sally Johnston, on behalf of the Staub family, and he will be introduced by Albert Kilchesty. Albert has served as the archivist and historian for the Baseball Reliquary since its formation over 20 years ago, and he delivered the very first keynote address at the inaugural Shrine of the Eternals Induction Day in 1999. We are delighted that he has joined us today from his home in Portland, Oregon. Please welcome Albert Kilchesty.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to try to get through this without having to put my glasses on. It's always a delight to come back and speak at these events. The very first event, there were just a few, just a few less people here for that event, and I'm thrilled to see that how the organization has grown into the modest success it's become over that time. Before I begin, I would like to mention the presence of a few special people here today in the audience. Well, it's all of you, you know. And without you, well, it'd be kind of weird standing here and talking to nobody. But there would be no reason for us to do this. And I would like to thank you personally from the heart of my heart, truly, for making the last 2 decades for me considerably less dismal. So thank you very much. So we are the Reliquary, you are the Reliquary, we are the Reliquary. All together we are moving this forward, and I certainly hope you will continue to come along with us on the ride. In the summer of 1969, Rusty Staub made a cameo appearance in my life that would have a significance far in excess of its brevity, and would affect, via a series of somewhat tenuous connections, decisions I would make later in life, but we'll get back to that in a minute. You can educate yourself about Rusty's different careers from a variety of easily accessed sources. And I imagine that many of you here today already know his essential baseball and biographical statistics. In fact, talking about baseball today is a bit secondary to what I would really like to talk about. I'd much rather talk about Rusty Staub as just Rusty, a human being, a good man, a righteous guy, a red-headed Catholic New Orleans-born mensch. And because that's the impression I always got from him. Thankfully, my thoughts about this were confirmed last night by Rusty's sister, Sally Johnston, who you will meet in a moment. And I was sure glad to learn that about that, because otherwise, who knows what I would be talking about right now. My days of extemporizing are well behind me after a rather disastrous appearance here some years ago. So, but thinking about Rusty, I mean, how could he not be outgoing and empathetic and fun-loving, caring, considerate, and generous? I mean, an entire country doesn't bestow one of baseball's greatest and most endearing nicknames on an arrogant prima donna like, I don't know, you think Barry Bonds, got that kind of reception from the fans? No, of course not. One doesn't become Le Grand Orange for nothing. Something amazingly life-affirming seemed to ooze from every pore of Rusty's body. And as an aside, I have to say that the typical American would translate Le Grand Orange in a pretty direct and predictable way as the Great Orange. But that just doesn't have the weight that Le Grand Orange has. An American would never say grand, first of all, to denote anything great. Nobody uses the word grand anymore, or hasn't used it in any American speaker, really hasn't used it since the 40s. And only then, it was pretty much women at that, as in, ooh, what a wonderful and very, very grand experience. But the French, and that the romance language adjective, grand, is so marvelous. And it carries so many more shades of meaning than the English word great. Not that the English word great doesn't itself have other connotations. The French equivalent just seems to yield more sumptuous possibilities. The magnificent, mighty, supreme, wonderful, generous, large-hearted, super-duper, all-potent, the big, the significant, the pretty damned awesome, and on it goes. That name's a sign of great, great respect. Le Grand Orange, truly. And fittingly, as the chicken said earlier, it's not often that a chicken steals your thunder. And fittingly, he became the first bona fide Major League star in Canadian professional baseball history. In Montreal, in Quebec, and soon throughout all of Canada. The name Rusty Staub reverberated everywhere throughout the country. Yay, he's ours, and we're damn proud of him. And Rusty actually took the extraordinary step of immersing himself in the French-Canadian culture, going so far as to take Berlitz language courses and speaking French so that he could interact with the fans and, most importantly, interact with the kids. So I've always thought that just a little bit of empathy can go a very, very long way. In New York with the Mets, Houston with the Colt 45s, Astros, with the Tigers, and people always seem to forget this one, the Texas Rangers, with whom he played very briefly. And of course, Les Expos, Des Ponton Brûlés, etc. Rusty left a trail of good cheer in his wake everywhere he went. And he affected kids, not just in Canada, but everywhere. Which now brings us back to 1969. And the effect he had on two kids, brothers, who at that time were 10 and 8 years old. And on Sunday afternoons, it was very common for my family to gather at the home of my grandparents in South Philadelphia. That's my point of origin. And we would all gather early in the afternoon for the customary huge Italian family gorge fest. The ones that you ate so much afterwards, and then you went even further and ate dessert, and after dinner you couldn't move, you had to unbuckle your belt. But those were some of the best memories of my life, those get-togethers. And the men, the men would gather in this, cram themselves into this small living room of a typical, row home in South Philadelphia to watch either the Phillies or the Eagles play. And by midsummer, my grandparents got their first color television. And I can remember watching with my brother, my grandfather, my uncle, my father, and others, the Phillies play the Expos in a game that was televised from Montreal. And their little park, the Parc Jarry Park, which in later years I always like to think was named after the French pataphysician and playwright Alfred Jarry. I used to, well, I used to get him off. That's just me. I'm sorry. So anyway, we're watching the game, and I can see that my brother is developing a little bit of enthusiasm for this newly hatched expansion team, the Montreal Expos. And I think, like a lot of kids, he responded initially and viscerally just to the bold primary blue and red and against the white background of their logo, that color scheme echoing the tricolor, French flag, of course. Colors like that weren't present in baseball in 1969. I mean, Charlie Finley and the A's had the gold and green and the bridal white thing going on. But the baseball establishment certainly looked at these colorful, inviting, and optimistic uniforms worn by the Expos, and they would think that they would call the players jesters, or they would say that the team is better off playing at a circus. But on the other hand, the kids, and this was really smart on behalf of the Expos front office people, kids loved it. Little kids loved it, and my brother was no exception. And I think also, subconsciously, and he was a smart kid, even when he was small. Subconsciously, I think he thought, why should I waste my time rooting for a team with such a long history of misery, like the Phillies? He could sense the pain that came out of every Philadelphia baseball fan, regardless of their age. Plus, this is a brand new team, the Expos, right? I mean, this team has no history, so the only place they can go is up. So they said he was a smart kid. So through a period of relentless pleading, the type of thing that only kids can do, and parents or adults tend to acquiesce just to shut them up. He convinced my grandfather to take us to a Phillies game next time the Expos were in town, which we did. They were in Philadelphia for a series over July 4th weekend. So my grandfather, on his way home from work on the following Monday, stopped by Shibe Park and picked up tickets for a Saturday afternoon game on July 5th, the day right after the holiday. And we went. My grandfather loved to sit along the first base line. And even before the All-Star break in '69, it was clear that the Expos and the Phillies were just in a battle to see who can stay at last place. And about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I went back, I found the game, and I found the box score, and I looked through it. And the attendance for the game that day was less than 4,000 people. So we had a choice of seats, and my grandfather loved to sit on the first base line. So we were situated just a few feet beyond the first base bag as we went out to right field, which meant that we had a bird's eye view of this big red-headed guy coming out in the bottom of the first inning to play right field for the Expos. And of course, it was Rusty Staub. And then I noticed that on the way out to take his position in right, he removed his cap and wiped his brow, and then I saw that magnificent red hair under that, that cap with these electric colors. But the thing that really got to me, the punctum, if you will, of that image was that he had received enough sun by this point in the summer for his very normally fair complexion to have turned, a tomato color. And the combination of all those different colors created an image that has stayed, which is still like, seared in my head. I mean, it's almost palpable, that image of him that day. So as we're watching the game, my little brother is getting more and more excited, and he's just fascinated by this brand new team. And he declares halfway through the game that from henceforth and through all eternity, he was now pledging his family troth to Montreal Expos. Of course, that led him to being really teased and kidded quite a bit. But I can understand why he would do that. And then, really, at first, just so I could needle him better, I began to follow the Expos team. And, of course, the exploits of their best player, Rusty Staub. And that single image, that single memory, had subconsciously a great effect on things that I would do later in life. After we got home, I read the encyclopedia entry for the province of Quebec and the culture of the French Canadians, and then their southern branch, of course, down in New Orleans, where Rusty grew up. And that led to my later in life studying French all 4 years through high school and continuing 3 more years in college. I traveled through Quebec for a month when I was about 18 years old, stayed in hostels, met a lot of locals, and had a great time. And furthermore, and I became later more and more interested in French art and poetry, literature, theater, and of course, cinema, where I would spend a good part of my early adult life, a field that I was immersed in for a good 20 years. And it continues today. That from that one moment of Rusty Staub with the Expos has continued today to my other interests and passions. I mean, it just snowballs. And I said earlier that these were kind of rather tenuous, after the fact kind of connections. But to me, they don't, that link between these separate things isn't at all, I mean, it feels very real. It's not something that I concocted in my imagination. I think it's really quite, as I said before, palpable. So from that moment on, I started to follow Rusty's career with, as I said first, casual interest. And then I saw him beat the Phillies time and time and time again with clutch hits for the Expos and for the Mets. We're in the same division as the Phillies. And then I was a bit stunned when I was writing his biographical entry many years ago, in fact, to discover that he retired with more than 2,700 hits. And I began then to recognize what a truly great player he was. I mean, not many players make their Major League debut at the age of 19 years and a few days without, exhibiting considerable talent. One thing that Chicken didn't fail to mention is that Ty Cobb and Rusty Staub were the only 2 players until, I don't know if another has duplicated this yet, but they were the first 2 players to hit home runs at the age of 19 and then later at the age of 40. So he joined that select company. And I've been kind of waiting now for 13 years, ever since Rusty's name was put on the ballot, to meet him here, on the day of his induction. And because Rusty, he was a reliquarian through and through. In fact, this specific event was designed to celebrate the lives and careers of people just like him. And it would have been great if he could have received this well-deserved recognition from savvy baseball folk like us. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But I feel that I have made his acquaintance at last, though. I'm very happy to say that, because whenever two or more people are gathered together in the name of Rusty Staub, he'll always be present. He'll always be here with us. And there are way more than two people here today. And it's a great pleasure for me to have met him at last. I would like at this time to introduce his sister, Sally Johnston, who's visiting us from her home in New Orleans, who will be accepting this acknowledgement of her brother's enshrinement on behalf of Rusty and the rest of the Staub family. So would you please welcome her this time. Thank you.
How do you follow someone like, I just have to say, my brother was a big man with a big heart, and just like he said, he was grand, la grande orange. And I can't top anything anybody can ever say about him other than he was there for everyone. And he loved his fans. The memorial in New Orleans for him, his teammate from the 1960 Little World Series team, which he was on and won, gave a beautiful memorial of him, saying that he went to visit Rusty numerous times and he knew that it was going to be another half hour before Rusty got out of the ballpark, because he signed everyone's autograph on the way out. Every child, anybody that wanted an autograph, they got it. And it's been a unbelievably memorable couple of months since my brother died. And it's people like you that have made it so worthwhile, and knowing that he was loved so much. Thank you so much.
I got out my calculator this morning and I did a little statistical computation. I was wondering who might have traveled the longest distance in coming to Pasadena to this afternoon's festivities. Now there's Dan and Katie Epstein, who flew out from Chicago, which is 2,014 miles. But I know my geography well enough to realize that Traverse City, Michigan, where Bart Wilhelm is from, is farther away from Southern California than Chicago. Sure enough, Traverse City is 2,316 miles. But then I realized that my old friend Mike Marjoram flew out this morning from Elizabethville, Pennsylvania with his daughter Becky, and that they are indeed the winners of the Long Distance Award. I checked the map, and it's 2,632 miles from Elizabethville to Pasadena. So Mike and Becky, we thank you for making the long trip. Mike, stand up, Mike and Becky. And I guess Mike forgot about the weather in Pasadena in the summer. He's wearing his flannel jersey from his Elizabethville, the wool. You're going to have a good drink afterwards, Mike. I will. Mike, not only is he a longtime baseball fan, but he's a collector and historian of Studebaker vehicles. Does anybody remember the Studebaker? Tommy John? Yes? And I know if Mike had his druthers, he would have preferred driving to Pasadena in one of his old Studies. All of which provides a nice segue into our third and final inductee, Tommy John, who was born in Terre Haute, Indiana, just a couple hundred miles or so from South Bend, where Studebakers were built for so many years. Tommy will be introduced by his son, Dr. Tommy John III. Dr. John is a chiropractor and sports performance and healing specialist based in San Diego. He is also the author of a new book, Minimize Injury, Maximize Performance, a Sports Parent Survival Guide, which offers strategies to deal with and reverse what he sees as a sports injury epidemic affecting youth in the United States. Please welcome Dr. Tommy John III.
Thank you very much. All right, let's begin with 3 words. Those 3 words are, let's do it. Let's do it. 3 words that would forever change the history of Major League Baseball. These were words courageously stated by a 31-year-old Tommy John who was facing a career-ending scenario. A torn ligament in his throwing elbow. And when the intelligently creative Dr. Frank Jobe offered up a possible solution, a surgery that had never been performed before in the arm of a pitcher, and your odds of return at best guess were 1 in 100. Tommy John's answer was, let's do it. He answered in less than a minute, and that was the easy part. Dr. Jobe knew it would require a certain type of person, player, professional. In order for this work, he required a faithful warrior. A warrior with unique characteristics, according to Angela Duckworth, best-selling author of the book Grit, characteristics for all masters of their craft that transcend talent include a firmness of character, an indomitable spirit, perseverance, passion for long-term goals, courage, conscientiousness, meticulous, having tenacity and resilience in the face of adversity. These were traits that we could see exhibited in Tommy John when he was 12 years old. When Tommy was a boy, he worked hard and saved up to purchase a book entitled How to Pitch by Bob Feller, to which he devoured, digested, and applied. And that's when he started his journey to pitching. Taking advice from his father, Tommy was to watch the only game televised at the time during the week, which was on Saturdays, and he was to emulate a particular pitcher of the game being played so that when TJ threw with his father later that night, his father would have to guess who had pitched that day. The pitcher Tommy regularly chose was Hall of Famer Robin Roberts, who had a very successful 23-year career. Not a bad individual to mimic. More on him later. Tommy John was a hardworking multi-sport athlete excelling in cross-country, baseball, and basketball. He was so accomplished as a basketball player, he had over 50 scholarship offers, with one being from the Hall of Fame coach Adolph Rupp, to which Grandpa kicked out of the house, which maybe you'll allude to that story later. I don't know the details of that, but it's a true story. Grandpa kicked Adolph Rupp out of his house. Yeah, more on that. But these coaches would have to take a back seat to professional baseball as Tommy John turned pro at the age of 19. Greatness was never not an option for Tommy John. In his first 12 years at the highest level of baseball, he became an all-star, was a part of a World Series team, and had amassed 124 wins before the fateful day in 1974, when his body just couldn't keep up on the demand. They always ask the greats of their industries to share to the general public what a few things they believe make them great or allow them to excel. And it's always interesting because the best can rarely answer this question clean. A pianist, an artist, a black belt, or a professional athlete, they will tell you it's a number of things, and no one thing more important than another. From the moment these people wake up, they are doing things to put themselves in a position to achieve their goal, their why. Every word, every action, every thought is either feeding the dream or antagonizing it. There is no magic silver bullet. The magic is in the mundane tasks performed every second of every day. Tommy John exemplified this for 12 years. If we stopped here, the story would still be nothing short of remarkable for any athlete. Now Tommy John was in a position to do something no one had ever done before. Come back and pitch after a ligament transplant surgery in your throwing arm. The doctors were going to have to follow him, with TJ listening to his body, as Dr. Job put it. Tommy John would have to figure out how to be great all over again. Those 12 years no longer mattered. The slate had been clean, born again, just to be given an opportunity. Dr. Job has been quoted as saying, "I did the easy part with replacing the piece. Tommy John did the rest." And guess what? Tommy John figured it out. After the radical, experimental, never-before-done surgery, successfully made 7 starts in 28 days after the surgery. 7 starts in 28 days. He finished his first season back from this surgery that wasn't supposed to work. 10 wins and 10 losses, 3.09 ERA. He made 31 starts and pitched 207 innings. Teams would pay $4 million for much worse than that today. According to Ryan Holiday, best-selling author of The Obstacle is the Way, all Tommy John ever looked for was a chance. No matter how slight or tentative or provisional a chance, he was ready to take it and make good use of it, ready to give every ounce of effort and energy he had to make it happen. If effort would affect the outcome, he would die on the field before he let the chance go to waste. I'd say Tommy John won the 1 in 100 gamble. Here is something few know. What if the surgery didn't work? What if Dr. Joe put it, TJ, you could come back and throw and your arm may just break in two. It may just spiral out of control. The ligament could just come apart, the new tendon. And Tommy John goes, then you'll do it again. And Dr. Job goes, well, the chances of that happening again are going to be pretty clean. It's going to happen again. He's like, then you'll do it one more time. I'm giving you 3 tries. 3 tries to get the first Tommy John surgery right. And he had a backup plan. He had already booked at bed and breakfast at Hoyt Wilhelm's house. It's a true story. He was going to learn the knuckleball. If his elbow couldn't sustain fastballs, he was going to learn the knuckleball, and he was going to come back as a major league pitcher as a knuckleball artist. There was no stopping Tommy John. Again, if we stopped here, this is one of the greatest success stories in sports medicine history, but TJ wasn't done. After the surgery, he pitched another 14 seasons and never missed a start because of his elbow. Nice. We'll run this up. All right. He never missed a start in 14 seasons because of his elbow. Those 3 words, let's do it, led to 26 total major league seasons, 3rd longest career in the history of baseball. 3 more all-star teams, 4 total. 3 World Series teams, 4 total. He had 3 20-win seasons. He's one of 8 pitchers with 700 career starts or more, and only 2 of those 8 aren't in the Hall of Fame, one being Roger Clemens and the other being that guy right there. To put in perspective what he did after the surgery, with 164 total wins, 1 less than Sandy Koufax had in his entire career. Because of his grit, persistence, tenacity, and undying effort, thousands of professional pitchers' careers have been saved by what Tommy John was willing to go through. Their success and longevity has not been the same as his. But maybe one day, they will learn how to earn what lies outside the protocols when they start to listen to their bodies, starting when they are 12 years old. One more thing. Remember the pitcher Tommy emulated and imagined following in his footsteps when he was 12? Hall of Famer Robin Roberts. Robin Roberts won a total of 286 wins. Tommy John won 288. Nothing's random. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you Hall of Fame worthy Major League Baseball legend, Tommy John.
Thank you. Thanks, Ted. Best thing that ever happened to Ted, the chicken. Dodgers, San Diego, Reggie Smith fired a baseball at you in right field, and it gave you 3 innings of trying to hatch that baseball. I remember it. It's a pleasure to be here. I really thought this year that I might get into the big Baseball Hall of Fame. And then at the, when you sign an autograph, you go Tommy John, HOF. Now I can write Tommy John, SOE. A lot of my friends have been awarded this honor. And I think it was 2012, Dr. Job was honored. And I had to introduce him. And I had to do that numerous times. One, we were at the Scouts dinner at the Century Plaza Hotel. And I'm sitting at a table with what's his name? Meathead with who? Rob Reiner. That's it. I knew his nickname, but I forgot his name. So anyhow, I'm up there. I introduced Dr. Job, talked about all this, and I said, now, he's famous for 2 things. The surgery, but the thing that he will be most famous for is his backyard backed up to O.J. Simpson's backyard. And I said, and he will find the knife when he's pruning roses. So I go back to the table and Reiner goes, who wrote that for you? Why would you say that? And I said, I thought it got a laugh. It was a great laugh. He said, I may use that. Go ahead and use it. But we were, my girlfriend Cheryl Zeldin and I live in Palm Springs. And by the way, anybody around Pasadena here that lives here that knows this area really well? You do? Where's the nearest gas station? Not that I gotta pee, but I've got to get gas. Okay, all right, that's all I need. Okay, that's good. That's good, all right. And also, I would like to thank you for coming all the way from Pennsylvania. We came from New York City. We drove last year to get home to Palm Springs. This is how much we like Palm Springs. Cheryl and I left Greenwich, Connecticut. It was like 2,800 miles. We drove it in 3 days because we wanted to get home. But anyway, where's the city that you live?
Elizabethville.
Where's that?
Nobody knows.
I know.
30 miles from the state capital of Harrisburg.
Oh, I coached in Harrisburg one year. Yeah, it was a good place. Yeah, oh, well, that's neither here nor there. But anyway, as Tommy was saying, I grew up in Indiana, and I was a better basketball player probably than baseball player as a result of the 50 scholarship offers. And yeah, my dad did throw out Adolph Rupp. And how that came about is Rupp was recruiting guys that I played against in my senior year, Tom and Dick Van Arsdale, twins. They went to Indianapolis Manual High School. He was over there, God, he was like our dog Jack. Jack will hump anything. And Adolph was on him they were on like crazy, I'm telling you. So they come over, the Van Arsdales sign with Indiana. And now they come over to Terre Haute. And I'm out playing golf. And my dad, they're talking and with his assistant coach. And he said, Tommy might not go to college. He's getting a lot of looks in baseball. And Rupp says, we've got a great baseball team. We've got a good baseball coach. Your son might not even make our baseball team. And you're trying to get me to go there and play ball for this guy? My dad looked at him and he said, Mr. Rupp, I've never liked you, ever in my life. Do you see that front door? Don't let it hit you on the ass on the way out. And that was Adolph Rupp left. He's gone. And, would I have gone? I had one baseball scholarship offer, University of Illinois, and I would have gone there. Because there was a baseball coach there, his name was Lee Eilbrock. The most honest college coach ever. Why is he honest? He said, we were over there for a weekend. He said, Mr. and Mrs. John, now that you got to understand this is 1961. And Faust was like 8 years old, I think, then. No, you were like, you're 3 years younger than me. God. This guy said, if you send Tommy to Illinois and pay for it, it's going to cost you like $4,000 a year for an out-of-state student. Now, it's 61. So it's going to take you $16,000, $18,000 for him to come to school here. He said, if a baseball team offers you significantly more money than that, you take it. He said, but if you want to come here, we just got a commitment from a junior in high school, and he's going to come. He's from right outside of St. Louis, and his name was Ken Holtzman. And he said, you two left-handers, we can win the Big Ten and go deep into the tournament. Well, here was a guy that said, I'd love to have you here, but if you get more money, he said, if you get more money and don't take it, I'm going to have you meet with our psychiatrist and figure out why. But I did. My Cleveland wanted me to come work out, and my dad and I got on a train, went to Cleveland, went to the ballpark, and I threw for him. I was massive when now I look like I'm 6 months pregnant, but it's another story. I was 6'3" and 160 pounds. I had a massive 38-inch chest, and a 28-inch waist, and about a 40-inch butt. But anyhow, I threw for him, and they took us up. It was Gabe Paul and a guy named Bob Kennedy. I think Bob managed the Cubs, didn't he? Yeah, I think he did. But they sat up there, told us, they have the thing up there, he said, there's one pitcher that is at your equal right now, and that's Sam McDowell. And he's a left-hander. Any organization can have 2 left-handers on their roster. Oh, okay, all right. So they made an offer of $35,000. My dad said, can we have a night to think about it? Sure, okay. So my dad and I go back, and he said, we've got to call this Philadelphia scout. We promised him that we would give the Phillies last chance. We called him, and he said, no, we can't even come close to that. Okay. Go back. Now, my dad is the Scott Boras of 1961. Mr. Paul, if you give us 40, he never got 1,000 out, and Paul was across the desk, hand out, he said, deal. And my dad shook, and back in those days, if you shook hands, it was a deal. And so I signed with Cleveland for 40 grand, and they put me on, a couple days later, they put me on a plane to go to that beautiful resort city on the Mississippi River called Dubuque, Iowa. I'd never been away from home in my life without my mom and dad. They put me on a plane, boom, and I'm on my own. And my dad told me, he says, you know, you've got a chance to really be good. Just keep your head down, hang around with guys that are better than you, and never stop asking questions. The only way you'll learn is to ask questions. And he said, the other thing he said is, no matter what you do in baseball, no matter if you last a week, if you last a year, if you last 10 years, whatever you do in baseball, you will be only Tommy John from Terre Haute, Indiana. And that's all I am. I'm Tommy John from Terre Haute, Indiana. And I'm glad I was brought up in Terre Haute when I was brought up in Terre Haute, because it was a whole lot easier than what it is now. Smoking weed then was smoking dandelions, you know. But my time through the minor leagues, we didn't have a pitching coach. Well, they had a guy that came around. His name was Hal Newhouser. Great Tiger pitcher for all you Tiger guys. Great Tiger pitcher. Come down, see me. Hey, kid, you look good. Okay. See you at the end of the season. You know, and I went out and I threw and I you know, got my butt kicked and but I got the season was 10-4. That's not bad for an 18-year-old kid from Terre Haute, Indiana. And the pitching coach for the big club, his name was Mel Harder. And Mel said, I see some stuff that I think you're doing wrong, but he said, I'm going to let you, I'm not going to correct you. You go do it, and then we'll work on it next spring. So 10-4, and I had probably twice as many strikeouts as walks. And we got to spring training. He said, you know, the things I saw, obviously it didn't hurt you pitching. Forget I ever said them. And as I look back on that, here was a man smarter than his years. Because nowadays, and I've been in the minor leagues, and I know what it's like, and you get all these coaches that want to put their stamp on the pitcher. And that they want to have them do this and do that and do that. And we're going to be stuck here, people. But I made my way through the minor leagues 1 year, 1 month, 13 months after I signed. June of 61, July of 62, I'm pitching in Triple-A ball. I had no more, I should never have been there because I was over my skis. There was a coach there, he was a player coach. He said, "Kid, I caught you in Cleveland. Just throw strikes. We'll chase the ball down. And if we can't chase it down, we'll outscore them." And I remember my first game was against the Syracuse Ball Club in the old Syracuse ballpark. And I don't know, I pitched 5 or 6 innings and left the game. And the next game I started was in Rochester. And I struck out Luke Easter with 2 runners on base and 2 out. And I dropped a 1-2 curveball on him. And he buckled like that. You know, I went, well, okay, got off. Next day, I'm doing my running, and I see Luke come out, and he's resting on his bat. And he talked, "Hey, Bub, pretty good curveball you threw Big Luke yesterday." I said, "Thank you." He said, "Can you throw that all the time?" I said, "Yes, sir." "You're going to be okay." I turned around and walked, and I said, you know, here I was. If I was smart enough to know that a guy came down of his stature, because I mean, I watched him on these Saturday games on TV. I mean, that son of a gun could hit. And he came down to tell me that he thought I had it. And, you know, I was called up, and I started, I think, 3 games in 63. 2 games. I lost both to California Angels. 64, I make the ball club, and I'm not pitching. We have a doubleheader in Baltimore, and I get the second game of a doubleheader. I go out, and I'm pitching against Robin Roberts, my idol. I mean, I watched him throw, and I watched him throw, and the guy back of home plate was an umpire named Chris Pelakudis. And I won the game, I don't know, 4 or 5 nothing. I threw a 2-hit shutout on 74 pitches in 1 hour and 34 minutes. Robbie pitched fast, I pitched fast, we got it done. And you know, in fact, I saw Robbie at a couple things, and he said, "You beat me your first win?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I must have stunk." And I said, "Nah, you were good." I said, "But it was just one of those games that I should have looked for pocketbooks that night." That's how lucky I was that game. But I just threw the ball up, and they hit it, and I had no idea what I was doing. Our pitching coach was a guy named Early Wynn. The only thing he taught you is where to go eat and drink. I don't know. Then I was traded to the White Sox, and that's where I really learned how to pitch. I don't even know if we had an organist back in 67, 66, 65. Did we have one? Yeah, it was out in center field. Yeah. Yeah, you were out there too? Yeah, well, I remember you booing me. I tell you something about Nancy. You know, she goes, "Nah, nah, 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 nah." I come back in with the Yankees after I leave the Sox. Now, she was there 70 and 71, and those were my last 2 years. And I just asked her, I said, "Look, if I leave the game," and I will, in fact, I gave up 3 home runs on 4 pitches. They couldn't load the scoreboard fast enough. So I said, "Just don't play nah, 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 nah." And I think she played back home again in Indiana as I walked up. If I made more money than $10,000, I would have sent you a gift. But baseball I had more fun playing baseball than anything. And, you know, I played against a lot of good. In fact, Pete Rose had me as one of the 3 toughest pitchers he ever had to face. And he said, "You can bet on it." When I came back to the Yankees, 79, we're playing the Tigers. And Rusty's with the Tigers. And I had a good game. I had a good sinker going that night. And they went over the New York sports writers wanted quotes so they could run with it, you know. And they came over and they said, Rusty Staub said you were throwing grease balls. And I said, you tell Rusty the only grease I've ever had was when I go to eat at his restaurant. It's in the paper the next day, all this stuff. John, you know. So I get to the ballpark and Rusty comes up and he said, hey, if you want a free meal or two, you gave me good press. You can go eat. So I said, okay, that'll be fine. But baseball was great. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed playing for the Dodgers probably as much as anybody. Any team. The O'Malleys made you feel part of the family. Mr. O'Malley, Walter, said, he had a saying, contented cows give sweeter milk. If the ball player is happy, if his family is happy, he's going to be happy. He's going to do things for us. And he just made it possible. It was just fun playing. I remember one day I'm pitching a Saturday game, and I'm one of the last guys, when I pitch, I'm one of the last guys to leave the clubhouse. They do all this stuff, and walk into our car, and I hear this, Tommy, oh, Tommy, Tommy. And I turn around and I go, holy shit. With his Ralph Lauren polo cotton sweater tied around his neck and his khakis pressed, and he's walking over, is Cary Grant and his daughter. We sit and talk about an hour about baseball, raising a family, and all this stuff, baseball and family, you know. And he said, I just love to watch you pitch. I said, oh, thank you. But I never had more fun than in 1977. We got rid of the old man, Walt Alston. And I think I was probably as much to do with that as anything. We brought in Lasorda. Was Tommy a good manager? For managing the game, he was not the greatest. But he made you want to come to the ballpark every day and bust your behind for him. That's what kind of a guy he was. I'm sitting on the bench one night in Dodger Stadium. I'm sitting there rocking, and the clubhouse kid comes in and he said, Tommy, you got to go up to Lasorda's office. I look down here. Lasorda's there. I go, what? So I go up to his office. The door's locked. I knock on the door. Boom. The door opens, and here in his tidy whities and a Dodger blue sleeve sweatshirt is Don Rickles. He said, come in. Lock the door. I said, Rickles, I'm not that kind of a guy. He said, lock the door, you effing putz. I need your help. Why? He said, I want to be ball boy, and I want you to dress me. I said, okay. So I dressed him, and I said, now the one thing, when you're playing baseball, the one thing guys notice more than anything is if you miss a belt loop. That just stands out. Boom. I'll be off here in 4, guys. So anyway. Okay. So anyhow, I dress him and he goes out and he's ball boy, and I go, oh, okay. And he was there for like 3 innings, and then he started to be a distraction to the game. So he leaves, goes upstairs, but when he passes me by, he said, "I owe you, kid." All right. Rickles, what's he gonna? Newhart says the cheapest son of a gun in the world, but anyhow, that's another story. So we get into the playoffs. I pitch game 1 of the playoffs. We lose to the Phillies in like 12 innings, and we didn't play exceptionally well. Kind of, just bleh. So Lasorda's in the clubhouse. He's railing. He said, "You guys," he said, "I'm bringing in a sports psychologist." And the door opens, and in walks Rickles. Now, the Dodger clubhouse was laid out alphabetically, so there couldn't be cliques. Rick Auerbach was 1, Dusty Baker was 2, Glenn Burke, it just, that's the way it was. And he's in on Rick Auerbach. The stuff he was saying, you couldn't say in Vegas. That's how bad it was. I mean, it was filthy. It was funny. Hey, guys are laughing. And he comes down, Bert Hooton, and he gets on Bert, and Charlie Huff. Charlie Huff. I go, "Oh, what's he going to do with me?" He said, Tommy John, debt's paid." Guys look at me. I said, "It's something." Anyhow, I'm managing in an independent league in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And we have 3 guys on our team from the Israeli Baseball League. And I get a hold of Rickles. I write him and I said, "Hey, we got 4 guys on our team from the Israeli Baseball League. Maybe would you like to come on a weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you can be the Tom Lasorda. You can manage. Whatever you want to do, it's yours." He writes me a letter back, "Tommy, you can have the whole Israeli nation, and I wouldn't come to Bridgeport, Connecticut." He said, "But I will be at Mohegan Sun around Thanksgiving time. If you want to come there, I'll get you tickets." But Rickles, he was fun. We saw him over here in Pasadena. Cheryl and her father and I drove from Palm Springs, and I forget the place. It was the Rose. Yeah, that's it, the Rose. Yeah. And, I saw Rickles. I went, "Oh, my God, this is not the Rickles I knew." But we went backstage, and Cheryl's dad was 87, and Don was 90. And they talked like they had been best buddies forever. And here Rickles took time to talk to this little fat weeble from Watertown, New York. And it made Roy Beecher's year, his life. He loved Rickles, and Rickles made him feel so special. And he died maybe a month after that or so. But the things I've done, baseball did them for me. Not me, but baseball. And the one thing my dad said is, ask questions. And I would ask, one manager we had with the White Sox, his name was Eddie Stanky. Eddie Stanky was a tough son of a gun, but I asked him question after question after question after question. Why this? Why that? Why would you walk the guy here? Why would you do that? And I learned more baseball from him, and I learned more pitching from him, and he knew nothing about pitching. But you know what he had me do? Next day after I pitched, I had to come in, and I had to recite the pitching chart from the night before. First hitter, what did he do? Grounded shortstop, what was the pitch? Sinker, what was the count?
The library is now closed.
That's what. I've got the first stall in the men's. But that's, Eddie, I couldn't do it. I could go hit and miss. He said, that's not good enough. I said, Eddie, why do I have to do this? He said, if you don't know what you did to the hitters the first 2 times you pitched against them, how do you know how to pitch them the third and fourth time? Well, nowadays you don't have to worry because they only face them twice and they're gone, and they let the bullpen worry about it. But that was his thing, and after about the third time, I could go one until I was out of the ball game. I could tell you the pitch, where it was, what he did with it, and it made me a better pitcher because I'm thinking out there of what this guy did the last time up. And I have one last story that I want to talk about, and it's, if you looked at my mouth, you see a lot of gold, and the gold was put in by Mark McGuire's father. I think Mark was from Claremont, I think. Yeah, went to Damien High School. And so I faced Mark in '88 at Yankee Stadium on a Sunday. And that Saturday night, I had disciplined my daughter, Tamara. She was 13, 14 years old, you know, right in that little shit-ass age that... But I'm leaving for the ballpark Sunday, and she comes out of her bedroom and she says, "I hope Mark McGuire hits home runs off you." So I go to the park. First time up, I throw Mark a little cheesy sinker away, and Mark goes with it. He goes, hits a big slice. Boom. Looked like one of Jordan Spieth's drives today. Big old slice, home run. Okay. Second time up, same pitch. Same thing, home run. I go, God, the little shit's got me jinxed. Third time up, he's got a runner on first base. I throw him the same pitch. And he tries to pull it. He goes, boom, 6-4-3, double play. As he comes across the mound, I kind of walk with him, and I just said, I outdumbed you. And I think I won the game 4-2. Those are the only 2 runs they got off of me. I'm on my way to the car, and Mark gets off the team bus, and he said, "What did you say to me?" as I'm walking across. I said, "I outdumbed you. You thought because you hit 2 home runs off of me that I would change. I'm not that smart, Mark." He goes, "Oh, okay." So about 10 days later, I'm facing him out in Oakland. First time up, I go, shoo, about this far off the plate. Shoo, ball 2, this far off the plate. Now I got him 2-0, and I run a fastball inside. Oh, and he jams him, and he pops it up. And as he comes back across the mound, I walk with him, and I said, "Not every time am I going to throw it out there." But that's what pitching is, not about throwing 100 miles an hour. It's about getting batters out. And it's about getting batters out. I used to throw first pitch curveball of the ball game because Eddie Stanky said, "I don't want to see first pitch of the game hit out of the ballpark." So I threw curveball. One hitter looked for it in all the years. Lou Whitaker. I threw it, and he's back like this, and as soon as oh no. And he just went with it and hit a line drive to left center field, base hit. And next time up, we've got a game of the week. Vin Scully is doing the game of the week, and Whitaker comes up in Yankee Stadium. First pitch of the game, Rick Cerrone goes, curveball. Okay, boom. I throw a fastball right here. And he throws his arm up, you know, and it hits him. And he looks out at me, and I shook my head, and I said, "It backed up. I don't know what I can tell you." But he was the only guy in all the years that looked for a curveball first pitch. You know, hitters are not the brightest guys in the world. And we make them out to be. Just throw what you throw best, and mine was a sinker. You were going to have to beat me with my sinker, Mark McGuire. You were going to have to beat me with my sinker. That's the way I pitched. And if I threw, on a good game, I would throw 90% fastballs, 85% fastballs. You can't throw that. You got to mix it up. No, I didn't. I mixed up sinker, curveball. I threw 2 pitches my entire career, 2. I was learning to change up at 46, and they released me. But anyway, thank you all very much. God bless you.